Welcome into Matchweek. I'm Will West. That's Chris Carroll. What we do is give you the top topics in the world of soccer or football, whatever you want to call it, every single Monday afternoon. You could like, subscribe. We'd love if you want more soccer content in your life. We're the place to get it. I'm Will West from Knoxville, Tennessee, a sports radio host, big Spurs supporter, joined by my friend Chris Carroll, longtime soccer player and coach from Wolverhampton in England, now lives in the States as well. Chris, how are you today, man?
I'm great, thanks, Will. How are you doing, mate? It's good to be with you again.
Hey, look, I hate to say it with Spurs kind of being as embarrassing as they are, but for the greater good, I think that whatever it takes to make sure Levy has no excuse ever again, that's what I'm going for. So let's lose them all. And now that we're out of the Champions League running anyway, let's just go ahead and lose the rest of them as far as I'm concerned.
Well, talking about being embarrassed, I'm a Wolves fan as well, so we make a good couple this afternoon, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about a lot today. Championship playoff, who's being promoted, who's going up. We'll do some table talk, look at the top of the table. 5 teams for 4 spots, it looks like right now in Europe. And then also at the bottom, the relegation battle has been absolutely scorching the last few weeks. And we'll talk about Lionel Messi maybe becoming even more of a billionaire because of the Saudis. But let's start out with the Champions League. This has been really, really an interesting tournament to me so far, Chris, because the English teams that were there, you have 3 teams that frankly probably haven't had their best seasons. Liverpool, who had struggles in the middle of the season, and then once Virgil van Dijk came back, they figured out some things in the midfield. Then you had, they've got some things, figured out up front now as well, but they didn't have a great showing in the Champions League. Chelsea didn't have a bad showing in the Champions League, even though it's been a bad season for Chelsea domestically, and then Spurs have been a train wreck from Jump Street. But so it's Man City versus Madrid, and then you have 2 Serie A clubs right now in Inter and AC Milan. What's your read on what you're seeing in the semifinals of the Champions League so far?
Interesting. Both semifinals interesting for different reasons. First of all, City on fire. You wouldn't bet against them, but they're against Real Madrid, who it doesn't matter what kind of season they're having domestically. Unbelievable. Champions League, they just own it. 14 times they've won the thing, and so you can never write them off. The holders, they're not going to give it up easily. And after the first leg, 1-1, it's still anybody's game, quite honestly. Now, you'd think City, they're good favourites for the treble, but I'll tell you what, I hope Pep knows what he's doing, because Madrid are just ready to pounce. The other one, I mean, what are the chances? Two Milan teams, 2 teams, the same city, share a stadium, and they're playing the semi-final of a Champions League. I mean, what an atmosphere, and it could really go off in this second leg with the crowd I'm talking about. Hopefully, it's a better game than the first leg. Go watch that one, and if City get through, I don't see them having too much to worry about. But yeah, great semi-finals, both for different reasons.
And it really seemed like that second game you mentioned, the 2 Serie A clubs, 2 Milan clubs going at it. Man, that's like a commercial for Serie A right now. A league that looks like it's falling behind a little bit, right? I mean, right now it seems like Premier League at the top, and maybe this is just the perception in the States. Premier League at the top, La Liga 2, Serie A 3, or depending on where you want to go with Ligue 1 in France. Serie A right now, and especially in the States, does not have a particularly big following. Part of that is the television contracts they've agreed to. They just took whoever gave the most money, as opposed to looking at who's going to create the most growth for the sport so they can make the most money. So there aren't a ton of Serie A fans in the States. And this is, for a lot of people, probably their first look at these 2 clubs. And I am interested to see what they can do. Now I'll ask you this, though, about Manchester City. We do take more of an EPL bend since it's the top league in the world right now. Does it speak to what the EPL is this year, that maybe it's a down year in the league, that there's only 1 English team in the semifinals, and frankly, City right now looks mortal in the Champions League, while they just look absolutely unstoppable in domestic league?
It does a bit, although recently, probably the last decade or so, we're used to 2 English clubs being in the semi-finals. But really, it's looking more like a flashback to the 80s, this is, because back in the 80s, 90s, the Serie A was televised. They got a lot of, it was very popular in England. Sunday afternoon, you had a Serie A game on, and it was a lot of English players were going over there to play. So a lot of the top players were playing. So it was a place to be almost. So it seems to be a bit of a resurgence now. Napoli winning the league. First time since Maradona helped them, I believe, to win the league. So, it's back to the good old, it seems like back to the good old days for Italy. And it looks like a 4 from the 80s in the Champions League. But yeah, maybe it is a reflection of the troubles that a lot of the English teams, your traditionally strong English teams, have been going through. And the newcomer to this whole look really is, if you look back over the decades, is Manchester City. The other three have been there many a time.
Yeah, and let me ask you then, looking at Inter, looking at Madrid, do you think that it's a benefit to them that they aren't really involved right now domestically? There's no chance for them to win their domestic league, so maybe they could put everything into trying to win the Champions League? Or do you think at this point, once you're in the semifinals, everybody's putting everything they can into winning the Champions League?
Well, if Arsenal had won, if they were still in the race, if they'd have won at the weekend, I think that there might be a good case for that. But I think now City are home and dry pretty much on that. So that takes the pressure off them. City just got to win. Well, they got to win one game out of two. And then they're home and dry with the league. So I don't think the pressure is as much now on City, and they're not split now with their commitments. They've still got the FA Cup to deal with. But I think, yeah, it has helped them. Real Madrid always seem to, like I said earlier on, they sort of have save something special for the Champions League. Milan, they look like they got one foot in the final. So yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough game for whoever gets into the final.
Yeah, do you think this can close the gap a little bit? I remember there's a piece that you sent me a few months ago from the 80s where Maradona is talking about playing a friendly with an English side with his Serie A club. And Maradona said, wow, they mentioned one player specifically, said he's good enough to play in Italy. And it was kind of a big deal that Maradona thought this guy was good enough to play in Italy. And now you look at it and you think, I mean, at best, Serie A is the third best league that's out there, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting how times have changed over the last 30, 40 years. But do you think maybe this can help lead to a resurgence of Serie A, or do you just say too much money in the English game, Spanish game, those top teams in the Spanish game, there's too much money, and Serie A is just kind of always going to be third at best?
It may well be. I think a lot of players, they did go for the money, but they also went for the cultural experience and learn a new way of playing soccer. At the time, the English had a style, the Italians had a style, and the Spanish had a style. And I think a lot of the English players who went there, they learned a new style, if you like, and they enjoyed doing that, or they were that kind of player who could excel in that league. I think now the styles are very intermixed, where you've got a lot of Italian coaches in England and you've got a lot of Spanish coaches in England. It's more cosmopolitan, it's more international in every country. So it's not as crucial. I think any players that perhaps want to go, they won't be going for the money. They'll be going for the experience. They'll be going to perhaps find a new way of playing or add to the way that they play. Will it be a resurgence? Yeah, it could well be. It could well be. And a lot of the players, they got that much money now. They might not necessarily move to Italy for the money. They might want to go just to have a cultural change.
All right. So let me ask you about City. Do you think this is the year? Does Pep get the Champions League monkey off of his back?
Do you know what? I really hope so. I've got a soft spot for Manchester City. Being a Wolves fan, in the 70s and 80s, City and Wolves were a similar type of level of club. They were usually around the Premier League and didn't win a lot. But City had some fantastic players back in the day, like Colin Bell, Francis Lee, Mike Summerby, and they were at Rodney Marsh. They were a really good team to watch. So that's why I'd really like them to win. I know you shouldn't really, if you support one team, you shouldn't really want another team to do well, but I would, and I'd like them to get. I'd like him to get that monkey off the back. I hope he knows what he's doing. In the first leg, Pepe didn't make any substitutions at all, which is never heard of. I mean, so I wonder what he's up to there. He
always does something. Doesn't it seem like he always does something weird that he never does in matches? When we get to deep into the Champions League, he always starts. I don't want to say overthinking it, but it feels like he's overthinking it a little bit.
I know. Yeah, you're right. And he got away with it. They played Everton, won at the weekend comfortably, 3-0. So now, hopefully, everybody's rested, and they're good to go. They won't make any slip-ups in this second. Surely not. They should just go for it and play their game. And he shouldn't tweak it too much just to suit Real Madrid. But you don't know what he's thinking, do you?
For the Champions League to the champion of champions, Lionel Messi, multiple reports over the last couple of weeks that he is going to Saudi Arabia. Now, his father says no deal is done yet. A French newspaper says that there is an agreement verbally, but there is no contract that's been presented to Messi just yet. Varying accounts on how much money it's going to be, anywhere from 350 million pounds a year for 2 years to 1.2 billion euros being the amount of money that he would get. And it does seem like everyone at least says it's going to be about 550 million euros over 2 seasons. Your thoughts on this? Do you think it's a done deal? Do you think Messi's going to Saudi Arabia? And is this the right move for him?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I really don't know. Is it the right move for him? I don't think so. I just, unless you're in Saudi Arabia, does anybody really care what happens in Saudi Arabia? I think it's Ronaldo's gone to Saudi Arabia. Has anybody watched one of his games? Does anyone know where his team are in the league? I certainly don't. And so I think it's a bit of a waste, to be honest with you. I mean, how much money do these guys need? It almost seems like a competition. Ronaldo's gone for, I mean, and you just named all those figures of millions, but after a while they lose their meaning because these guys have got so many millions anyway. What I don't really get it, to be honest with you. Maybe I would if I was in their situation. I don't know, but I don't see that it really helps their legacy of their soccer legacy. It's kind of like guys going to the MLS at the end of their career, and we're not talking as many millions. It's more for the and perhaps not the millions of pay. They get them in the States. They'll get the millions from sponsorships and all that kind of thing. But I don't get it. I don't see it. I don't like it, to be honest with you. It's got to the point now where does anybody care if he goes to Saudi Arabia or not?
No, it's like it just falls off the face of the earth for as far as the rest of the world of soccer is concerned.
Yeah, like Ronaldo has. Who knows what Ronaldo's doing from week to week, game to game. Unless he's not happy with something, it doesn't really make the news. So I think he'd only harm himself. Whether he'll go or not, I don't know. But he seems to have fallen out of love with PSG, and they've fallen out of love with him. So I'd really like to see him play a year or two in the Premier League.
Yes,
just because, just because play it is what's supposed to be the top level in the top league in the world. That would be a challenge for me that I think he should. I'd respect him more if he stepped up to that challenge.
I don't want it. So far be it for me to tell someone else what to do, right? Like with their money. I would love to see him play in the Premier League for at least this season. At least give it a go. And I understand that he's aging at this point. He's well past his prime. I get it, but he was still good enough to win a World Cup this year. So or this past year. So Messi still has something in the tank, and I would love to see him against the top other players in the world, night in, night out, week in, week out with the different match weeks. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. I also wonder what would the market be. How do I tell somebody to take 200 million pounds or 20 million pounds a year, which would probably be the high end of what he could make? And there will be a lot of teams that be afraid to hand someone at his age and maybe diminishing skill level, that kind of money to begin with, where he might be the second highest paid player in the league or third highest paid player in the EPL. And he's the guy that, you're going to have to sub off at 60 minutes or something like that, or at least have some type of limited schedule for. How do I tell him to take a tenth of the money? I mean, like there have been reports that his wife's not happy about the idea of Saudi Arabia, but if it really does have the potential to make 250, 300 million pounds per year for 2 years, that's so much money. Now, he has so much money he could never spend it, but this goes from being rich to becoming wealthy if Lionel Messi ends up pulling a billion pounds. Now, I'll be honest, if I was his wife, I'd be concerned about that as well, right? There just been different things of WWE when they've gone to Saudi Arabia and some of the women being held up and things like that. So if you're his wife, you're probably not there. And if you're Messi, you're probably not around your wife and your kids for a while. That's got to be a little bit difficult. But the idea of anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion coming into your bank account to play 2 years in a league that nobody cares about, I'm not saying I agree. I'm saying I understand, Chris. That's all I'm saying. It's so much money. It's such an outlandish sum. Why in the world? I'm not going to fault him if that's what he decides to do, but he is going to soccer purgatory. I mean, that's where he's going, right? Like, it's just, you're in football nowhere. Once you go to Saudi Arabia, no one's going to know what you're doing. No one's going to care. It's not going to draw a headline, but I guess you have $1 billion to wipe your tears away. If you do go to Saudi Arabia, no one cares about you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't have to get a part-time job anymore, would he?
No.
So, but yeah, like I say, I might feel like you said as well. Maybe it'd be different if I was in his shoes. I don't know, but I just think just a waste because, again, no one cares what Ronaldo's doing now. Look at Ronaldo's career and what he's done and the headlines he was making and how everyone really. But he's just lost. Everyone's just lost interest in him, I think, in Ronaldo, and I think the same may happen for Messi. And I just think it'd be a shame. The money's ridiculous.
It is now, but it makes me ask the question though, because we've just dealt with this with the PGA here in the States, where you're seeing and a lot of the best European players as well. Could we see a live golf type situation with European soccer, where what's happened here is, I mean, I would say half to 2/3 of the best players in golf have decided to join the live tour, and they're not really involved in anything except for the Masters, and that's about it. And they're on this completely different tour that nobody really watches, but they're making 9 figures to be able to do it. Could we see that maybe? I'm just going to throw his name out because I know that he's probably going somewhere this summer. Could you see Harry Kane go to Saudi Arabia? Could you see Bukayo Saka, instead of re-signing with Arsenal the next time, decide I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia? And do you think the Saudis might throw around that kind of money that much in the way that Live Golf has just rated the PGA and gotten at least half of the top talent? Do you think we could see the Saudis, if they have this much money for an over-the-hill Messi, could we see them go after top players in their prime? And would those players leave Europe if they're making 10 times the amount of money going and playing in the Saudi league?
You want to say immediately, that's crazy, but crazy things are happening now in the world of sports, aren't they? And money does talk. I can't see it. I just cannot see players leaving the traditions, leaving the history that they've grown up with, just to do that just for money. They'd lose too much. It just wouldn't be the same feel for them. It can't be the same atmosphere playing over there. It's just it's not. I mean, it's different going to the States to play. It's a completely different atmosphere. Let alone going to Saudi, that has got even less of a history than the States. So I can't see it happening. You watch, it'll happen in 12 months' time. No, but
but I also wonder, Chris, because we have the UEFA president 2 weeks ago talking about a salary cap's coming to all European leagues. And if you're Jack Grealish, and the next time the contract comes up, am I willing to take less money than I'm making right now because there's a salary cap in the Premier League, or am I going to go to Saudi Arabia and make 5 to 7, maybe 10 times what I would make signing with a Premier League club? Again, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it should happen, but I just watched this happen with golf and had to cover it. So it makes me wonder if this is a possibility, especially at the same time that the PGA refused to give players more money and they wanted to keep a good portion of it for themselves. And the players, here's your pittance, and you can just kind of deal with it. And eventually players said, okay, fine, we'll go to the Live Golf Tour. I just can't help but wonder if European soccer leagues and UEFA setting themselves up to create Live Golf version of football by trying to handcuff and limit the amount of money the players can make in Europe. And then you have the Saudis who can just kind of throw money around all they want to.
It's an interesting concept, isn't it? It's a great question, actually, because I'm sitting here thinking, well, maybe the middle tier or the lower tier of players would go to Saudi for that big money, but they're throwing the money at Ronaldo and Messi. So you're getting the guys. So where does the trickle down stop from those two? And where does it stop going up from the guys who are in League 1, 2? Because the Saudis might think, well, let's start at the lower level, those middle range players, and let's throw a few big, a few million at them. That they wouldn't. Those guys in League 1, League 2, they don't make the millions that the Premier League players do. So I could see them being attracted and going. And then do they grow it, and does it become bigger long term from them? I can't see it happening, quite honestly. But like I say, you never say never.
And I do wonder, could we see, instead of them going to the MLS, I do think aging players, that might be a place where they go moving forward, is instead of going to the MLS and hoping that you can create money off of the Americans or own part of an MLS team. Frankly, Messi's going to make in 2 years what it would take 30 years to make being a part owner of an MLS squad. So that could also be something that we see as aging veterans deciding to go to Saudi Arabia instead of going to America and playing for an MLS side. All right, let's take a look at the championship this week, Chris. As we sit right now, at the time of this broadcast, We'll have the other second legs of the semifinals tomorrow and Wednesday. But we sit with it right now. Middlesbrough and Coventry deadlock, nothing in round one or the first leg of that one. And then you have Sunderland topping Luton Town 2-1 in the championship. Burnley is the championship playoff. Burnley's already been promoted. Sheffield United already been promoted. Let me ask you about this, because I don't know a whole lot about Luton Town, and we don't really get access to every championship game here in the U.S. You get 2 or 3 is what you can pretty much stream, and yet you get a selection of those in the U.S. that you can choose from on ESPN+. Luton Town was a club that almost made the Premier League for the debut season, and then they were relegated the year before, correct?
Yeah, 1992, I believe they were last in the Premier. What was the top flight? What was the Premier League? And they dropped out then. So, which to me doesn't seem that long ago, because I've been around a few decades now. So, all of these 4 clubs actually have got a big history. Maybe not a big recent history in English soccer, but they've all been in that Premier League at one time or another, and for big chunks at a time. But sticking with Luton were there or thereabouts. Luton have won the League Cup. They were there, like I say, up until the 90s in the top flight. And then through a series of financial irregularities, mismanagement, they were getting points deductions when they dropped out the Premier League. They got a points deduction in that next league. Then they got a points deduction that carried over to the next year. And so they just fell out of the league and out of the top 4. And that's considered non-league then. So they're in what's now the National League. They were there for 5 years, got out in 2014. So 9 years ago, they've been slowly working their way back up through the leagues, which is fantastic, which is a great thing to be able to do. And that's the attraction of that pyramid system. So for the romance of it, I'd love to see Luton go up this year. I really would, because for the fans. It's not the fans' fault if their club's not run correctly and there's financial irregularities going on. So the fans have been through it of Luton. Likewise, Coventry City, the similar thing. But I'd love to see Luton make it, to be honest with you. Out of the 4 clubs, that would be a good story.
Sunderland's interesting because that's a pretty big club to have been down as long as they have. But again, same story, financial irregularities and things like that, mismanaged finances, and kept them down for a while. They have Louis Dreyfus, who was taken over the club a couple of years ago, promoted from League One to the championship last year, and looking to go back-to-back promotions. Has that ever happened, especially to get into the Premier League? Again, in the States, we've only had access to the Premier League for about 7, 8, maybe 9 years.
Yeah, quite honestly, I couldn't quote you on now, but back-to-back promotions through the leagues have definitely happened. Whether they've gone from 3 to the Premier, from 2 to the Premier League, I'm not sure. But Sunderland, again, what a history they've got. FA Cup winners in the 70s. As a second-tier club, they beat the mighty Leeds United in the FA Cup final. That's one of the best FA Cup finals ever. And huge club, like you say. Probably the biggest profile club out of the 4 that are trying to get in. Well, that's arguable, because Coventry City were constantly in the top flight. When I was growing up, they had an uninterrupted spell in the top flight from 1967 to 2001, Coventry City. So when I was growing up, buying the Panini stickers of all your players, Coventry City were always there. They were just top flight. So, but back to Sunderland, they've got like over a 40,000 seater stadium. They're big time, big fan base, and big. So it'd be great to see them back as well. They could really hold their own, and good for them, because they dropped to the 3rd tier. All these 4 have been up and down these leagues like you wouldn't believe. They've been all around the place, these 4. So it's going to be great for whoever does do it, and it's going to be heartbreaking for the other 3 being so close.
Okay, let's go back to Burnley, if you don't mind, and Sheffield United. The teams, they're not in the championship playoff, but they are already going to be promoted. Burnley just ran wild, ran away with the championship and won the title. It seems like it was a foregone conclusion 2 months ago, right? Do you think Vincent Kompany's still going to be the manager when they get promoted? And if you're Vincent Kompany, are you looking at one of the big jobs that may come available, let's say Spurs or something like that, and saying, when you get an opportunity for a big job like that, you take a big job like that.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't mind betting he was offered a big job. He seems to have turned it down. I think he's just signed a contract to stay with Burnley for a few years, although contracts are worth absolutely nothing in soccer now, that's pretty well known. So I think he looks like, he's going to be staying with Burnley for this season and give it a year and see what happens, I think. And I get that. I understand that. Again, I'm not in his shoes, so I don't know. But I think if I'd brought a club up playing a certain way, they've absolutely blown the league away. I think it'd be good to test yourself with those. It won't be the same players, but to test yourself with a lot of that team against the big boys and see how they go. If he's not going so well and he gets an offer, then you can see him moving. But then the offers, if he's not going so well, then the offers dry up. So that's the gamble that he's going to have to take. But he seems, by all accounts, he's very, very well respected. Pep thinks the world of him. Pep thinks he's going to be a huge success, or even more of a huge success. So yeah, I think the future's bright for him. But I think he's going to be starting with Burnley next year and give it a good go.
And if you remember from a couple of years ago, when Sean Dyche was there and Burnley went down, they didn't really get the help that they needed as far as financially to bring in players at the transfer window to keep them up.
Right.
There were so many reports at the time that the new ownership at Burnley was very willing to let them go down at the championship to kind of retool some things and rebuild some things, and then maybe make a bit more of an investment when it comes to the player side once they came back up. And so I can't help but wonder if this new ownership at Burnley isn't going to pump some money into this team to make sure they stay up for a while. And then Sheffield United, again, they've been down for 2 years. And they're right back up as well. That is one really interesting, because Sheffield United's a smallish club. If you look at what their stadium is and things like that compared to some others, man, they just seem to get the most out of that club, especially over the years when they've been up. When Chris Wilder was there, they're spending literally less than a tenth of what City is, and they were able to stay up for a few years, and then they go back down. Now they're rebuilding with another veteran manager. What are your thoughts on Sheffield United?
Yeah, big club again, massive history. I think of Sheffield United, I think of Tony Curry back in the 70s. He was an absolute superstar, maverick player, so skillful, flamboyant. And again, those I can visualize those Panini stickers and the old guys. But so Sheffield United, the Sheffield Cities, Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday, huge histories. And it's good to see them back as well. Sheffield United have been like yo-yoing up and down over the last 10, 20 years as well. Done well to come back after 2 years. You can be stuck down there for 20 years if you're not careful. So Sheffield United have done well to bounce back and yeah, worthy of their place, because if you can get those top 2 places in the Championship, you've done well, because it's any 3 from probably 3/4 of that league can go up at any one time, at the end of the season.
Let's look at the Premier League table right now, Chris. At the top of the table, you have Manchester City. Arsenal taking the loss this weekend probably means that their title hopes are done. Newcastle sitting at 3, United 4, Liverpool 5. 5 teams for 4 spots at the top of the table. How do you think this plays out?
Well, it's funny how what a season this has been. You just can't predict a thing, can you? I mean,
yeah.
I had 3 weeks ago, I had Newcastle dead set 3rd place. I'm not so sure now. I'm really not. And I think Brighton are the fly in the ointment for me with Newcastle. Brighton fans must be absolutely pinching themselves, by the way. Not too many years ago, there was ground sharing. They were in the 4th tier of English soccer, and now they're playing some unbelievable soccer. I watched them against Man United a couple of weeks ago. Superb. I think I'll text you. I said I can't believe how I hadn't watched them too much, and I couldn't believe how good they were. Then they go and lose 5-1 to Everton.
Made no sense whatsoever watching that match.
Yeah, and then they put 3 on Arsenal and put Arsenal away at the weekend. So because Brighton seem to be flying, but for the Everton game, Newcastle have still got to play Brighton. So I see them dropping points there. Man United, I don't see dropping any points. They got Bournemouth, Chelsea, and Fulham. They're going well enough. They did enough to put Wolves away, but that's not difficult. And I don't think Liverpool have got enough. They're playing Leicester, Villa, Southampton. I don't see them losing either. I just see Newcastle, but Liverpool can't catch Newcastle, I don't think. But so I have, to answer your question, Man City first, Arsenal second, and then I got Man United third, Newcastle fourth.
Okay, so yeah, I think that'll probably be the way it goes down as well. You don't think Liverpool gets there because I don't think that Liverpool can break it. I thought they were going to a few weeks ago. Man, Newcastle has done a great job because we mentioned it beginning of the season. They jumped out to a really nice lead, or really second on the table, and part of that was just Almiron scoring 10 goals in the month of October or something like that, and then you knew, well, that's not going to be sustainable. He never scored more than 6, and in a season before that, so they have really figured out how to score. They stay on the front foot. They're really well coached, a well managed team, and they figured out new ways to score. And I just don't think they're going anywhere. So even with the improvements, and I know the Liverpool's playing right now as we're doing this broadcast against Leicester City, I just don't think that Liverpool can get there, and it's probably going to end up being Europa League for them.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Newcastle, what's happened with them is similar to what's happened with Arsenal. I think they've just run out of gas, or running out of gas. I think, although Newcastle, as long as they come fourth, I think they'll be absolutely delighted. I think Arsenal obviously more disappointed because they were hoping a few weeks ago they were 8 points clear at the top of the league, so they're hoping to win the league. But I think Arsenal ran out of gas. I think Newcastle haven't been up there either. It's new to them. I think so. Maybe the pressure's got to them a little bit, and they've stuttered a little bit over the last couple of weeks. But yeah, I think Liverpool have left it too late. I think if there was perhaps a couple more weeks, I think Liverpool could just maybe pull Newcastle in. But I think the end of the season is coming in time for Newcastle.
Relegation battle. It's pretty much 5 teams for 2 spots, or 4 teams for 2 spots. Southampton done. They are going to be relegated. That official this weekend. Leicester City, who's in action right now. And then I guess Forest on 34 points, Everton on 32, Leeds at 31, Leicester City at 30. We kind of talked about this a few weeks ago, and I think we both thought Leeds and Forest were going to be the teams that are going down. Forest has done a fine job digging themselves out of relegation territory. Give me the 3 you think go down at this point.
Well, Southampton, of course, and based on who they're playing, and again, you can't. This season's made mugs of a lot of people trying to make forecasts because it's absolutely all over the place. But you just got to go with what you know. I don't see Leeds. Winning. Having said that, Leeds have got West Ham and Spurs. I can't see where Leeds are going to get a win out of that. Really, Everton. I got them getting out of trouble. They got Wolves and Bournemouth. Yeah. So if anyone playing Wolves this time, any time of the season, quite honestly, they've got a chance. So Everton are going to get out of it, I believe. Having said that, I don't think Leicester are going to make it. I don't think Leeds are going to make it. And I think Everton and Forest will escape. So it's the 2 L's for me, Southampton, and then Leicester and Leeds.
Yeah, I'll take the same 2 clubs. I think Everton's going to be fine. Part of that is I just don't think Leicester City can gain points on them. So I think Everton could drop the next 2, and it doesn't matter, right? So because I don't think that Leicester City can get there. Forest seems like they're clear. I don't know the Leeds is going to pick up points at all. So, I hate this for Leicester City, though, because part of this, it seems like they spent money on stadium upgrades that were necessary. Financial fair play regulations led them to not really be able to upgrade the roster. And again, I've mentioned this to you since February. That's the slowest midfield I can ever remember seeing in the Premier League. And don't get me wrong, that they have really athletic forwards. They're okay at the back. They've dealt with some injuries Leicester City has, but that midfield's just not good enough to be able to play at this level. And so I hate it for those fans, but it looks like they're just going to end up being relegated.
Yeah, it is a shame. Considering 2016, there was the big year that they won the Premier League, and
for people who don't know, that was a big year that a lot of Americans started paying attention to the Premier League. Was when the Leicester City run, when that happened, that's when a good portion of the American fan base for the Premier League really started tuning in.
Yeah, and 2016. It's a few years ago now, but it just seems like yesterday. And they didn't build on what they had. They had a great opportunity there to build and attract some top level players to the club, and they didn't. They sold most of their best players. Didn't replace any of them. I think they got a decent. On paper, they got a decent team. They just look lethargic. Every now and then they'll look like the old Leicester and they'll get a good result. They get a win, they get a tie, and they look. Vardy's come back into the team, and he's looked busy, and he looks like he cares. And then they'll go back to looking lethargic, slow, like you say. The defense has looked all over the place. They've looked better since Sioncho. They brought Sioncho back in. Is that how you pronounce his name? I'm sorry.
I mispronounce everyone's name, so I'm the wrong one to ask there.
But they've looked better since he came back in. It just looks like it was all over the place. They've never really got going. Having said that, they were up there. Well, maybe October time, November time. They're there, and they've just slid since Christmas. They've just alarmingly slid, and something I don't know what happened, but they just haven't been able to turn it around. So it will be after a Premier League, an FA Cup win. If they drop out, it'll be a real big shame for them because, like you say, like we've said before, who knows when they'll get back.
That's the tough part because you got to think Madson's gone, Vardy's not going to be there, Kasper Schmeichel's not going to be there, so you're kind of rebuilding around these young guys that haven't panned out, and they can't play at a Premier League level. It doesn't look like, or at least successfully at a Premier League level. What can they do at the championship? That's what's going to be interesting to see. Chris, fantastic job, sir.
Cheers, Will, and you too, mate.
Yeah, and look forward to next week as well. Remember, like, subscribe, more of the EPL content, soccer content every single week on Matchweek.